It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it is time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Elvira, the character we've known about for about a week thanks to data mines, but was just finally officially revealed earlier this morning over on YouTube. You already know the drill. I'm going to give you my 2 cents on the character. Do I think she's good? Where would I play her? What would I play her on? Artifacts, all of those things you've come to expect from me in a First Thoughts and Initial Impressions video. So without further ado, let's take a look at Elvira's S3 animation.
You look like you're dying to know more about me. That's cute. I don't like to be rushed. Let me savor it. This'll be fun.
Okay, so the animation is great, and I think the sprite on this character is gorgeous. I think it's one of the best in the entire game, but I'm going to move past that entirely because the fanboy in me cannot contain the fact that the English voiceover artist for Elvira is Ali Hillis. And for a lot of you, that's just going to be Karen from Boruto's dad, but for me and anyone else who played video games in the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, she is someone who has given the most badass delivery to some of the cheesiest battle quotes in all of JRPG history, including things like, "A target's a target. Savior's got a job. I can kill a god." And of course, the most ridiculous one, "I'm no one's slave." She is Claire Lightning Farron from Final Fantasy XIII. And also the Louis Vuitton model of the same name. That last one's true, by the way. Look that up. I am so stoked that we have Lightning in Epic 7. Okay, I got the fanboy out of my system. Let's move on to Elvira's stats. She is an Ice Thief of the Capricorn Zodiac symbol. She shares a stat line with 2 other limited units, I Winter, as well as the recent Blooming Litica. She is the first non-limited character to have these stats. Taking a look at them, she has 1,057 attack, 532 defense, 5,542 health, 118 speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 30% starting effectiveness, 30% starting effect resistance, but that's misleading. That is actually due to her passive, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Dual attack chance is 3%, imprint release for the team is attack percentage, and imprint concentration is effect resistance. If it's not obvious, this character really wants effect resistance, and again, that'll become apparent when we take a look at the kit. You probably do want dupes because effect resistance is going to be one of the most important stats on the character. But overall, aside from the 118 base speed and the starting effectiveness, the rest of the base stats aren't particularly pretty good, especially that attack stat for a thief. And that's going to be one of the major sticking points, again, that we'll talk about throughout this video when we take a look at the actual kit. So let's not delay. Let's take a look at it now. First up is Elvira's passive, Blood Mana. It has a 2-turn cooldown on the Exterminate component. Increases the effect resistance of Elvira by 30 to 50% depending on Malagora, and when attacking cannot trigger a critical hit. When the caster is immortal, decreases the amount of fighting spirit gained by the enemy by 100%. After using a basic skill on the caster's turn, when the caster is immortal, activates Exterminate as an extra attack. Exterminate can only be activated once every 2 turns. Exterminate is an AoE attack with a 0.5x attack multiplier, and it inflicts Beguile on all enemies. As you can see, there's the reminder text for Beguile, which I'm not going to read because everybody should be pretty familiar with Lua at this point. Moving on to the S3, it is Capturing Sacrifice. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Attacks the enemy, dispelling all buffs before making them unhealable for 2 turns, and grants immortality to Elvira for 3 turns. Again, it is a single target attack with a 0.2x attack multiplier and penetrates 100% of the target's defense. It also deals damage proportional to the target's current health. That multiplier is 16% of the target's current health. Essentially, Capturing Sacrifice functions very similarly to how Zio's S3 Bow Down Before Me works, at least when it comes to damage. Finally, we have the basic skill, which is Hit and Run. It has a 1x attack multiplier, swiftly attacks the enemy, and has an 85 to 100% chance based on Malagora to dispel 1 buff from the target. Soul Burn effect for the cost of 20 souls grants an extra turn. Essentially, when immortality is about to run out, you Soul Burn, Hit and Run, take an extra turn, go back into Capturing Sacrifice, and keep your immortality up for yet another 3 turns. Okay, so now that we've talked about the kit, let's talk about the positives. This character's S2 passive, Blood Mana, shuts off many of the game's best characters currently. Disabling Fighting Spirit is something we've needed for a really, really long time, so that being in the kit is a huge boon to her. She also gives the insanely excellent Beguile debuff on her S2 follow-up, assuming that she actually has Immortality. But that's actually one of the big rubs of this character, right? She actually has to get a turn and use her S3 in order to do her job. And that basically means she's got to be fast, she's got to be bulky so she doesn't get picked off, and she also needs to be able to resist things like stun or silence, especially in the face of a character like Zio and his skill 3. So let's start with that last one. Blood Mana plus her imprint plus the artifact selection on the Thief class goes a really long way to helping with the ER problem. You can get 50 from the passive, 27 from the imprints, and a maximum of up to 40 from the artifacts that she has available to her if she decides to go for Hostess of the Banquet, and you actually have that artifact at plus 30. If you went a triple resist set from that point, you'd have 177% starting effect resistance before we even talked about things like an ER ring or any of the substats on your gear. You can probably pretty easily break 300 effect resistance on this character if you want to try for it, and you are a whale and have all of those artifacts and all of those imprints. That said, 300% effect resistance still feels like it isn't enough sometimes because ER is kind of a scam at high levels, it feels like. So I expect a lot of people to kind of mauled whenever an AOL eventually invalidates this entire character. Her base speed at 118 means you don't really have to worry about being fast too much to get a turn. But being fast on this character with the speed set is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Faster speed means that you are spending less time in Immortality, which means less time doing her job of denying Fighting Spirit against things like Navy Captain Landy or Abyssal Euphine, so she then becomes incredibly soul hungry in order to be able to soul burn to go back into the Immortality. Her base stats, as we talked about in Blooming Lidica, are also not terribly great for becoming super, super tanky. But considering that the character can't actually crit, it's not like you need to build damage on the character. And oh boy, we are not building this character for damage. Did you guys catch it? Did you guys and girls catch it when I was talking about the multipliers for this character when going over the kit? Elvira's biggest drawback is that this character actually does no damage. It honestly makes me wonder why Blood Mana says she can't crit at all. She is entirely reliant on other characters to help her out. She honestly feels like Rowana in that sense, where it's basically like, I'm playing this character for the passive and the fact that she looks really good. This character actually can't kill outside of Beguile. Capturing Sacrifice has basically non-existing damage, and Exterminate has below average multipliers for an AoE as well. Capturing Sacrifice, as I mentioned earlier, functions a lot like Zio's S3. This thing straight up is not killing an opponent at all unless they're like sub 2,000 or 3,000 HP. So don't even try for it. It has just absolutely miserable damage when it comes to killing a target. At least the move has a full strip on one target, so that's a bonus, I guess. Overall, the character's kit is kind of self-sufficient. It does what it needs to do in order to function. You know, you get the Immortality, and then you sit behind Immortality and ER and deny them, and that's great, I guess, but she just can't close a game on her own, and this is something that Ace Trainer talked about as a liability in the Sue Talks when we had him on. Certain characters, like if they just aren't independent and can't carry you over the line, then sometimes they just might not be the best at high level. If Elvira is on her own, she's basically relying on Beguile to kill. And that's not to say that Beguile isn't a bad skill, because it's a really insane debuff. And again, anyone who's played with Lua knows that damage kind of adds up pretty quickly. But that's your only real way for this character to actually have a shot of killing anything. By the way, I should take this time to say, Beguile does not stack with the Beguile from Lua, so don't even try to stack Elvira with Lua, it's just not going to work. Our boy Redos tested this for us already, so we know Beguile does not stack between two instances. Overall, though, do I think Elvira is good? Actually, yeah, I do think she's pretty good. There's a lot to like about this character. She has really insane chip damage with Beguile. Denying mechanics from some of the best heroes in the game is pretty good. Great base speed at 118 as well. But the reliance on needing to get to a setup turn where you're vulnerable to being, picked off by like Cleave or something, the dependency on effect resistance to have immortality, and that kind of feeling like a fake stat in the face of some people and their just effectiveness gear on things like Angel of Light, and also just the insanely bad damage multipliers outside of Beguile. I think those are the things that could potentially hold her back. Again, I really just don't understand why this character can't be built with crit, considering how terrible her multipliers actually are. So, last thing to talk about before we wrap it up, the artifact. Beguiling Wings increases effect resistance by 15 to 30% based on artifact level after using an attack except for a basic skill. When a non-critical hit is made, removes 10 to 20 souls from the enemy based on artifact level. Soul removal can only be activated once every 4 turns. If you want bonus effect resistance so that Elvira doesn't get her immortality stripped, Beguiling Wings is a pretty good option. Hostess of the Banquet provides more effect resistance, though, than Beguiling Wings. So if your goal is just raw effect resistance, I'd play that. The problem is that Hostess gives bonus damage percentage, which we just established. This character can't deal damage. So for me, the way that I would try to play the character is with obviously high ER, so that way immortality doesn't get stripped, but decent speed, like, 240, 250 range, right? As much bulk as I could get my hands on, and play her on an artifact that gives value over the course of the game. Like, for example, Nostalgic Music Box. Anyone can use that. It gives a ton of base HP, and if Elvira is doing her job and just cycling through her turns, you're going to get a lot of value from that thing at the end of the turn. But yeah, otherwise, Hostess is just a bit better, I feel like, than Beguiling Wings, because at least it gives you some damage. Like, the damage is still going to suck, don't get me wrong, but at least you get some damage, and you will get more effect resistance. I don't particularly think Beguiling Wings is going to end up being the play on the character. I could be wrong, but again, it gives less ER than other options that are already out there, and the soul removal it's a kind of a more passive way of removing it, right? You have to actually fulfill a condition to get rid of it, when traditionally, if you're really trying to deny souls, it's best to do it proactively, like Bellion with Shackles of Suppression. Just turn it off right from the start. That would be the ideal way to stop people who are abusing souls, not having to fulfill a condition. And even then, the ones that we already have where you have to fulfill a condition, there are things like Ran, for example, on his own artifact is a better way to deny souls, and that already doesn't really see any play, largely because RNL is pretty good. But even then, you don't really see people going for like Pocket Ran with a strategy like that to try and deny souls. So I'm not super big on Elvira's artifact. Again, I think it's going to probably be either something like Music Box or, as I said, Hostess of the Banquet, which is Gala Lilius's artifact. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on the character. Hopefully this kind of helps you decide whether or not to pull for her. Again, I still think that the character is good. She just has some potential cracks in her armor. She does come out tonight as of the recording of this video, so best of luck to all of you on your rolls. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye-bye now.